South Africa's unemployment rate has dropped by 0.6% to 33.9%. It's down from 34.5% in the previous quarter. Almost 600,000 new jobs. Almost 650,000 new jobs were created in the second quarter. Let's get you an update now with our business reporter, Kopano Gumbi, who has been listening into that briefing, Kopano, by the Statistician General. I see you there. Tell us more about these figures.
Yeah, Tembegile, for the first time, I think, since the pandemic, we've seen a decrease in our unemployment figures, down to 33.9% now in this second quarter. Most analysts that we'd spoken to ahead of this release had expected that this number would in fact increase, given some of the economic shocks we've experienced, the floods in KZN, as well as the high levels of load shedding that we've seen in the last second quarter. However, the numbers have come in quite positively. 648,000 people are now in work. More people, I should say, are in work than they were in the first quarter of 2022. Joining me now to unpack more of these numbers is the Statistician General, Mr. Risenga Maluleke. So thank you for your time this afternoon. Unemployment figures have decreased. Interestingly, to us as reporters at least, is the not economically active number has also seen a significant increase. Can we talk about that a little?
Let us start off by unpacking the numbers and indicate that two things have occurred. One is we have seen people moving out of the discouraged work seekers, as well as from other not economically active, straight into employment figures. So while the percentage share of unemployed the unemployed has decreased, we have seen a slight increase of the unemployed by about 132,000 persons, from 7.9 million to 8 million. However, because the share of the employed has increased by about 648,000, that's more than 500,000, that actually has led to the decrease in the percentage of those that are unemployed by 0.6 of a percentage point, straight to 33.9%. But that is not the only issue. What we have seen is that when you take the 8 million unemployed people who represent the 33.9%, and then you add another 3.6 million of your discouraged work seekers, plus another 700,000 who didn't look for employment for other reasons other than discouragement, we see that we come to about 12.3 million, which then has lowered the expanded unemployment rate by about 1.6 percentage points to about 44.1%. So when you look at these developments, we have seen in the first quarter, when you look at the economy, in the last quarter of 2021, our economy grew by 1.4%. In the first quarter of 2022, our economy grew by 1.9%. And in the process, coming out of COVID-19, we have seen our economy starting to make a recovery. Actually, at the height of COVID-19, which was the second quarter of 2020, where we had the highest levels of lockdown, our real economy was sitting at 952 billion. As of the first quarter of 2022, which we have already reported on, it was sitting at 1.153 trillion. So we can say that it is recovering. And while there's a lag, and of course we don't measure from the same sources, the economy and employment, these employments come from household surveys, but we can see that a growing economy is starting to create employment post-COVID-19.
And on that point, we can see similarly that a growing economy is starting to create jobs in certain industries which previously were losing jobs, correct?
Certainly. One of the things we have picked up is that construction, for example, has been depressed for quite some time. It has been losing jobs quarter on quarter. Whereas from the economy side, it hasn't grown. It grew in the negative and contributed negatively in the first quarter of 2022. But we are seeing that in this quarter, second quarter of 2022, from the side of employment, it has created about 104,000 jobs. Having created 104,000 jobs, it is not the only one that has created jobs. We have seen community and social services creating about 276,000 jobs, 169,000 jobs coming out of trade, and of course finance creating about 128,000 jobs.
SG, when we look at the negative side, unfortunately, with the youth unemployment numbers equally coming down but still very, very high, the Stats Department differentiates the two bands between 15 and 24 and 25 and 34 years old. And we see a big gap in the difference, the number of unemployed persons in that gap. Can we unpack why we differentiate firstly between the two ages and then the gap?
Well, according to international comparisons and benchmarking, youth are classified as 15 to 24 years. You would expect that people that are 24 years and higher are adults in their own right. Some of them have their own families, their own children and the like. Whereas in our case as a country, we have been tracking young people up to the age of 35 years. Having said so, according to the International Labour Organization guidelines, we have to look at the need, not in employment, education or training. That is why we have that band of 15 to 24, because you would expect that when people are aged 15 to 24, they are either in employment. If they are not in employment, they should be in education or training. But you would not expect people of 34 years or 33 years or 32 years to be still at school. So that is why we differentiate that. That is the first thing. The second issue is that we are seeing that young people in general, and so are women, are vulnerable to labor markets. Their unemployment rate, especially of those about 15 to 24 years, is way above 61%, and the one for those 25 to 34 years is slightly above 41%. Yet when you go to unemployment rate of those aged 15 to 64 years, it's below 2 digits. It's actually at about 8.6%. Having said so, young people, again, aged 15 to 24 years, in general in our country, there are about 10.2 million of those. About 3.7 million of the 10.2 million are not in employment, education or training. So they wake up and roam the streets. And of course, it's very critical that we look at this issue from the unemployment levels as well as from the not in employment, education or training. Now, when you look at the unemployment rate for women, particularly black Africans, it's higher than the national average. So particularly when you are black African and you are young, you are actually much more vulnerable to labor markets.
SG, thank you so much for your time. That's all we have time for here today. Statistician General there, Thembekile Risenga Maluleke, painting a picture for us, although positive news in that overall unemployment continues to decline, there are still some areas of concern. Of course, he wouldn't say that, but there are still some areas of concern around young people. As he said, if you are black, young, female, you are at risk and vulnerable to unemployment. Thembekile.
Kopano, Gumbi, thank you very much for that update with the Statistician General on the latest unemployment figures.